I would like to kindly ask you to do a really brief introduction of yourself, presenting who you are and what you do on the team or the project.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh,
Okay, so who's
yeah.
going to start? So perhaps I would like to ask Martina to be so nice as, as
Okay,
part of
so
our team.
yeah, I'm going to be the volunteer. Hello,
Yes,
everyone. I'm Martina from Masaryk University Brno. My role here is currently being a vice director responsible for pedagogical activities. That means that I take care of organizing teacher training activities, professional development activities. From time to time, I'm also involved in some projects, but this is not my main responsibility. But obviously, our activities overlap and they very often have international dimension to it. My background is in teaching English, and I'm also really interested in providing support for learner autonomy support. That's been also my research interest. So speaking of projects, I give the word over to Barbara.
So hi, my name is Barbara. I also work here at Masaryk University Language Center in Brno. My role here is coordinator of international and European projects and cooperation with foreign institutions, which practically speaking means that I deal with the majority of the international projects we have here at the Language Center. My background is also, though, from teaching. I studied languages in Italy, and then I moved here. I started teaching English, Spanish, and Italian. And then during the last 2 to 3 years, I started cooperating more and more with the project department, and I in the meantime studied also my PhD in Spanish literature, so both activities go parallel at the moment. And opening to Spanish background, I give the word to Athena.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to present our university, our language center, and I'm happy to present myself. My name is Athena Alhazidou. As Barbara has mentioned, I'm a Hispanist, and that's why I'm interested in everything that's related to the Spanish language, culture, society. And actually, my background is related to teaching, language, Spanish culture, society, but also I'm a translator, and I'm interested in translation studies. And that was our first bound to Murcia University, where backwards in the time, we were collaborating with the Department of Translatology in Murcia. So thank you very much for inviting us to the project.
Okay, so I would like to know a little bit more. So, what is the role of MUNI within the project? What are you in charge of?
Okay, perhaps I can continue and then pass the word to my colleagues. As us, MUNI, that means Masaryk University, we are collaborating practically with our partners in everything, because our main role is coordination of the Quality and Risks Commission, where we participate mainly in coordinating all those steps that are necessary so that the progress of the project is just smooth and nice. And of course, as all partners, we participate also in other working packages. And perhaps here I'm going to pass the word to my colleagues. Perhaps Barbara can continue, because together with me, she's the member of MUNI team who's the longer time here in the project involved.
Yes, as Athena mentioned, we since our role is the one of quality, we of course have to be aware of what's going on all the different work packages, which is why we try to participate as much as possible also in the activities of the PR1 and the activities of PR3. We just started in the project with PR2, so slowly we will be attending also those meetings and trying to keep track of what's being done at the moment. Although I think that aside from quality, our major involvement will be then in the PR3 with the creation and the establishment of the Innova Lab. And maybe here I can pass the word to Martina, who more directly follows the pedagogical activities and so can better explain how in Mooney and in the Language Center specifically, we will be cooperating on the Innova Labs.
I've joined the project when it started to grow and to bloom, I would say, and we were happy to participate in collecting data about the teachers. As Barbara mentioned, we are by the activities observing them and contributing. The data will then be elaborated with under the moderation of Murcia team. But I'm really happy to see that we can get insight into how teaching is done at our university and also the comparisons of situation at European scale, which is going to be great. And it will result in navigating all those different settings in how to develop teaching technologies and teaching methodologies further. We have been doing quite a lot in that respect at Masaryk anyway, but having something that we can call lab, something really innovative is going to be a great contribution to our activities. And right now we are discussing a meeting that we are also helping to organize here in Brno. We have just discussed a possible date for that, and that will be also one of our contributions, that the second meeting of the Murcia project, the project meeting in November, now as we know, is going to take place here in Brno.
Okay. So thank you so much for the responses. And so far in the project, we're seeing that there's particular ways of teaching in European universities regarding the branch of knowledge. There's differences from psychology, business school, sports centers, and you come from a language center. So I would want to know if you see or you notice any kind of difference or particularities in the way of teaching languages respect to teaching all the type of topics as the language professors.
I can maybe start and then give over to Athena. I think there are things that apply to whatever the content of the teaching is, but there might be some specific related to teaching languages being teaching communication skills. So the way we are in touch with our students is a bit different, because the language is there and at the core, and it's the means of communication as well as the target content, the target knowledge. So it's a bit more intertwined, and maybe that's why sometimes thinking about how to communicate, for example, aims of teaching activities, or how to make peer collaboration easier for our students is a bit more natural, or a bit more usual to us language teachers. But in other respects, I think every university teacher makes a consideration about assessment, how to be fair, how to make learning content accessible to students, how to give them a chance to develop themselves further. So I think there are both those levels. There are specifics of certain fields and disciplines, but there are many overlapping categories that we can focus on together. Would you agree, Athena?
Yeah, thank you, Martina. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's exactly reflecting the evolution in our field as teachers, and moreover, as language teachers within a higher education institution. And all of us know that there was a very decisive moment during the pandemic, when the paradigms had to change dramatically. And languages, I would say, we have an advantage in that sense. University courses are always scheduled to foster not only language learning teaching processes, but also to foster communication and presentation and self-presentation of research results. So all this makes our courses unique and makes them important, because all our students are researchers or future researchers, and they need to communicate their results, partial results, intended results, or also research plans and proposals, so that they can compete within the European, let's say, scene, and that they can collaborate. As we know, the 21st century setting makes it important that our students are aware of the 4 C's. That means critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. And when we are speaking about creativity, of course, that includes intellectual flexibility, intellectual preparedness to somehow be able to reflect the changes, and innovations form an important part of that. So that's why we are very happy to be part of the InnovaLab project. And I pass my word to Barbara.
Yes, I think that both Atena and Martina actually covered this one pretty extensively. So there's not much to add. I just want to really underline the last part of Atena's explanation, because really with the more and more importance that is given to the 4 abilities of the 21st century, of course, teaching languages had to have an important change, especially as Atena was saying, after COVID. Like, we need to find a different way of approaching language teaching, and especially during COVID. Like, COVID taught us a lot, because in the moment in which you teach communication skills, as Martina was saying, and you have to switch it from an in-person or tendentially in-person setting to a completely online setting in which the student has no one to dialogue with in the immediate premises, of course, there's a need to rethink teaching approaches. So yeah, it is extremely important to keep that in consideration.
Okay, so you've said, Atena said that you have a student that are researchers, or they are willing to become researchers. So do you think there are difference in those the students you have to teach regarding the students that maybe we as psychology professors have to teach? Like, do you think that the interest, the active participation, or the implication within the class are different, or it's the same type of student?
Well, I think we have the advantage of at least sometimes have students in interdisciplinary setting. Yeah, we do meet them in mixed groups. We do meet them based on their interest in developing certain skills that not necessarily correlate with their disciplines. And this is both the advantage and both a limitation in certain respects. But we can kind of sometimes observe things that go beyond those categories. And we might be able then to maybe to also observe changes in like generations, that they pre-COVID, post-COVID generation, or the way they approach artificial intelligence right now. That's what we might be able to bring into the project, knowing that some of the things really more correlate with a generation or with a stage in how students' population evolves as a whole, rather than to their specific backgrounds. That's probably what our colleagues from other departments or the other fields would navigate better, knowing what works the best for psychology students or what are the specifics of economics students. I think what we can provide, sometimes we can do that also, because sometimes we have courses for specific disciplines, courses of languages for specific purposes, targeted courses, tailor-made courses, needs-based analysis courses. But sometimes we can provide this a more general perspective.
Yes, in that sense, I would say that it's very important precisely for researchers to be able to, or future researchers to be able to present their results very well, not only in their first language, but also in English and in other languages. and precisely perhaps this filter makes sometimes students think very well what's the most important part that they should communicate from their research, because and it's logical because they are gaining their experience in communication and presentation of their research, so they are trying to find out what works best for them, but perhaps what can seem as a disadvantage to the need to express myself in another language can be potentially a very good tool to make me structure better what I want to express, and that works finally very well when presenting it to audiences that are listening to me. So we can see that in our interdisciplinary courses that Martina has mentioned very well. And actually, this is the feedback that we have from our students, that they are very happy to have this experience.
Well, and I'm really happy to know that you have really good feedback for your students. That course sound really interesting for young researchers. And we've been mentioned pedagogicals, like the courses, how we structure it, like assessment. And Martina, you have published articles about the role of the teacher in the learning process. So can you tell us a little bit about this? Is there the using of this kind of activities or active methods depend more on the teacher, on the background? Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the topic that I've been researching is learner autonomy, but it's naturally connected to teacher autonomy, and that's the two poles of the same principle. Thinking of distribution of roles and responsibilities, which I think is crucial in tertiary education, that we consider our students to be our partners. I've already mentioned needs analysis. That's where we always start. What are their needs? What are their future needs? We are trying to predict what our students might need in the future once they leave our university setting, actually. And I believe, and many researchers who have been invested in learner autonomy development and support believe that that's something we really need to invest more time and energy into, really focusing on building their strategies, building their attitudes to taking responsibility over for their learning. Once again, this can be very nicely demonstrated on the COVID period, when we could have provided for students, we could have, given them so much resources, so many resources, access to different materials, but they needed more than that. Yeah, they needed to access and activate their learner agency. They needed to activate their special powers, yeah, to be able to self-regulate their learning. And we believe in our language center that this is also part of that, which makes the mix of skills and competencies that we try to train and develop even bigger. Yeah, so it's not only language competencies, it's 21st century skills, or whatever you want to call those soft skills and those life skills, but it's also the way how to really take responsibility over developing those skills and not only being dependent on the teacher and on the input that you can get during you being there in classes, being there at the university.
Okay, so related to this, and I would like to know the opinion of you, because in other interviews with the members appear this debate about active method being dependent on the branch of knowledge, on the teacher, of the experience they have. And some people would say that as you teach languages, it's a branch of knowledge that actually facilitates you to use active methodologies, because it's not like teaching law or teaching history, which means that you have to explain it and it may be more easy to use a traditional way of teaching. So I would like to know if you think that using active method really depend on the branch of knowledge, on the teacher experience, or what do you think it's more related with?
Okay, perhaps I can start. as the senior teacher with experience and in teaching precisely not only languages, but mainly clear courses. That means the content is important and language is only an instrument. And this is the important aspect we should also mention in our particular case, because we do not teach our students the language itself, because they are already having the B2 level at least, both in English and Spanish, if we are speaking about those two languages. So that means that our purpose is not to, our main goal is not to improve only their language skills, but as Martina has mentioned, there are particular aims, and it always depends on the particular target group. If it is a clear course which is focused on presentation skills, or we also have courses that are focused on conference skills, precisely for PhD students or master program students who already start participating in international student conferences where they are presenting parts of their research, which is part of another center's research as bigger institutions they come from, faculties usually. So all this is one part of what is very important, but as you also Alodia have mentioned, it can depend on the teacher, and I would say that it's always the teacher and the policy of the center, and it can be the language center in our case, or the institution as such. And we are really happy in that sense that Masaryk University really considers language skills and language knowledge very important, and that's why our center here can really go following the most important challenging, let's say, the most important challenges that are here according to how the society develops. And that goes with what Martina has said, that for our students, we are partners in that sense that we are reflecting very much their needs, also individual, but mainly as groups that are within particular setting, that it's very amoebic, that's very changeable, and which is reflecting the turbulent evolution in our society. 2 years ago, nobody would think about AI, and now this is a part, an integral part of what everything we do. And languages, I would say, in that sense, are concerned much more than other branches in that sense.
Maybe just to add, yeah, this kind of figuring out where is it easy, is it possible to activate students and to approach students with active methodologies in other disciplines. I definitely think it is possible, and at our universities it's highly encouraged. We have also wonderful cooperation with another center that is an institution at Masaryk University, and they were established exactly to support that, to support the quality of teaching, development of innovative methodologies across disciplines. Yeah, and this is supported by our rectorate. This is a vision that the good teaching should be an element at every faculty, and it's been discussed. We have annual conferences where new approaches to teaching, both online and face-to-face, are discussed on regular basis, and you always see fascinating contributions across disciplines. There would be really fascinating teachers coming from physics, and one would believe that it's difficult to approach, in a creative and innovative way discipline like physics, but definitely it is possible. And as Athena mentioned, it always depends on one individuality, but also of the overall spirit. And I think the spirit has really changed dramatically at Masaryk University, and teaching is considered as something that is highly relevant and that really needs to be balanced with research, because those two elements make the university what it is and what it needs to be in the future.
And perhaps to complement, I would like to say that international collaboration is very important. So Barbara can complete.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to exactly say that not only like the general atmosphere, Masaryk University pushes us as teachers to really focus on innovating the way in which we approach teaching. So not only rely on the traditional methodologies, but also try to have a more active approach, but also cooperating with foreign institutions and seeing how in other universities across Europe, and not only across Europe, but across the world, this active approach is studied and is brought into the class, of course, makes a huge difference also in our institution. I have seen both approaches, if we want to say it, as a student and as a teacher recently, like basically almost parallelly, and definitely a more active approach is possible in all the fields. I am absolutely convinced on this. And also one of the other cooperations that we have here at the Language Center is a cooperation with the European University Institute within the Max Weber program. So every year we receive a certain number of postdoc students who come here for a teaching practice week. And exactly during that teaching practice week is during the feedback sessions that we organize for them, when they can like share their experience, what went well, what didn't go so well, etc. That is when I realized that really active approach and innovation in teaching in general is possible in all the fields, because the postdoc that we receive are not from languages, they are from law, from economy, from gender studies, from different fields of research. So it is really the proof that it is possible to have a more active approach, and it just needs, as Martina and Athena mentioned, it needs the teacher to be in a certain sense open, but also the overall context in which that teacher is teaching, of course, makes a huge impact.
So I'm really happy to see how more experienced professor has this spirit, and how young teachers like Barbara, which is a PhD, and even myself, I'm also a PhD, we are willing to actually make changes and try to improve. That's always a good way of thinking, so that we can always make things better. And related to this thing of active methodologies, Athena, you have a conference that's titled The Use of Comics in a Didactic Tool in the Application of the Task-Based Learning Method to Develop Creativity in Spanish as a Foreign Language. So it really got my attention, because you were talking, or I assume you were talking about how to use comic for teaching a language. So could you actually talk us a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Alodia, for mentioning it, because yes, this is one of the great things that we can see. And again, there is some evolution. I think that it's not only the case of our Central European region and Czech society itself, but in the past times, the genre of comic was somehow linked to a second-class literature, and rather of bad taste, or those who were not those that were not forming the most important, let's say, part of the national literature. But this is changing, and it is changing in international context, because in Spanish literature it would be the same. And actually, I was at your university, where you have great great experts and great center in Murcia. There is a great center focused on comic, and actually the importance of comic is very big, not only in teaching, learning languages, because there is this visual support, but it becomes also a very important instrument in our societies, because we have to see that we have learners of all ages, from young kids to adults, who come to our countries as migrants. And for them, the content is much easier to get via those formats that resemble a comic. And it can be the first step how to receive really important information of whatever we can think of. And it can include like great classic literature. It can include laws. It can include regulations. It can include cultural patterns. It can include anything. And it works well with students of any study program. It works well with audiences of all sorts, of all ages, of all cultural backgrounds.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting. I never thought that a comic could teach that much information. And I would like to ask you a last question, which is that we know that in this project, we are trying to develop a tool to help professors with instructional design and developing some training courses for them. So I would like to know, what are your expectations, or what do you hope to achieve with this development, not just of the Innova Lab, but also the ConnectEU application that we are developing?
So what we expect, and I hope it's in line with the project design, is to have additional framework for our professional development activities that can be not only used by our language center, but that can be shared across university, and that can be shared in a European context. And using those individual tools, we can map what the situation is, or we can, starting from individual level, then to institutional level, then to beyond institutional level, monitor what are the gaps, what are the teachers' needs, what are the skills that they feel confident about, and what are the areas that they would like to work on, or they should be working on, which is sometimes a difference. And then also establish a pool of ways how to develop it. And I use the word framework because I think it's going to be, in our context, something additional and complementary. It's going to be something that they can be offered, they can be navigated to, and they can choose from. And ideally seeing the pool of activities, and they will consider this as something continuous, something that we as a community are going to work continuously on. And this, ideally, this is the outcome we are hoping for, will allow us to really consider professional development as something that is, a never-ending story, a process that is a continuous process, and it is a process done both at individual and at community level.
Yeah, actually, I would like to add that because I am, first of all, a teacher, for me, I see it in the same way as Martina has mentioned, as a potential way where we can follow the trends, but also we can continue our networking. And that's not only on our level of partners, project partners at the moment, but each partner has their own partners. So the network is really very broad. And of course, we can find those who do something that we do in a similar way, but at the same time, we can see ways that are challenging for us, and we can perhaps think about how that could be transformed, that it would fit into our own let's say, strategies, and that can be used and brought to our courses so that our students can be enriched, our students and our teachers, because this is both ways. I mean, we speak about teachers, but as we've said so many times, it's very interlinked. It's now the times where the teacher was providing something, and it was an independent corpus, and students were receiving it, and it was another, let's say, corpus which was interconnected very freely. Now this is a two-way process which is linked very, very closely, and which is changeable. So the main part of the innovation is and of the innovation lab that we are producing is that we are going to prepare a skeleton, which or let's say a library, a virtual library, where the items, the, let's say, virtual books will be changed according to needs of their readers.
Yeah, I think that I agree with what Martina and Athena said. Those are like the expectations that we have here at the Language Center, and I think that us, like personally, we hope to achieve that.
So thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful talk. I really learned a lot from you guys. And I hope that once we upload the video, the rest of the members and the rest of the people that see could learn also a lot from you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us in Brno, kind of.